Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're continuing our series of these kind of beginner tutorials that have been created by Apple developer. So if you want to kind of follow along with this video, if you want to follow along on your own screen, I'll put the link in the description below. But essentially we're just heading on over to developer.apple.com, tutorials develop in Swift. The link will be in the description, way easy for me to just say that. And we can see that we have some tutorials. We've already covered chapter 1 and chapter 2 in a previous video, in our first one. We just also did layout and style in video number 2, and now we're diving into number 3, which is buttons and state. So we're going to explore adding buttons to our apps. We're going to learn about Swift closures and their relationship to buttons. We're going to use the state properties to update the user interface automatically. There's lots that we're going to be covering. Also on my Xcode here, you can kind of see a preview of what we're going to be creating. So we're going to kind of create this dice roller thing where we can roll the dice and see it dynamically update. We can also add some additional dice to roll individually as well, which will be pretty cool. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. So we can click on the Update UI with State. All right, we're going to get started by creating a new Xcode project named Dice Roller. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Xcode here. I'm going to create a new project. Let's do iOS app template. Don't need any storage. SwiftUI, I'm going to call it Dice. And immediately it wants us to create a new SwiftUI file called DiceView. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to press the plus button in the bottom left, new file from template. We're going to do our SwiftUI view here. We'll call it DiceView. Let's go ahead and create that. All right, cool. In our DiceView, it wants us to replace the body code. So this text hello world here, we can go ahead and replace it. And we're going to use some SF symbols found within Xcode. And we're going to use the die face one. So we're going to go ahead and say image system name die.face.1. If you don't want to type this out, you can also use the object library here. So if you go to the plus button in the top right, we can actually search the symbols here. So if you're selected on this kind of symbols library, it looks like a little star, we can look for die face. So you would instead just go ahead and drag and drop that one in. Cool, now we're going to add a property to the view to represent the number of pips on the dice. So under our structure of dice view here, and before the variable body sum view, we're going to create a variable here. We'll call it number of pips. I didn't know that's what they were called. They were called pips. We'll say that it's an integer value and it's going to equal 1. So let's talk about this a little bit. So this property is marked with the keyword var for variable, which means we can assign new values to it. This view is dynamic, so we'll change the value of the property when people roll the dice. When we assign a default value to a structure's property, it's not required in the initializer. That's why we don't have to change the DiceView instance in the preview to include number of pips. So we have here the name, we have the type, which is integer, and then we have the default value, which we've set to be 1. All right, we're now going to use string interpolation to display the number of pips to see the corresponding dice images. So this is pretty cool because we have, those different roles. We can actually go here and where we have die.face.1, we can actually remove the 1 and use string interpolation. So we're going to forward/, we're going to add some brackets, and now we're going to interpolate that variable we've created, which was number of pips. Let's now use some modifiers to change the size of the image. We can use the resizable modifier. So we go down here, .resizable. It's going to tell it that it can stretch anywhere to fill any available space. Since we don't want it to fill all the space, this looks super cursed, definitely not what we want. We're going to go ahead and limit it with a frame. So let's go after this resizable, do a frame. We'll add a width, and we'll set this to be 100. We can also add a height, which we can also set to be 100. Now we have this nice square. And just to kind of change the default here so we can see how this works, we can change this integer value to 5, and it's going to grab that dice image with 5. If we were to set this to be 8, because that doesn't exist, die only roll up to 6, we're not playing with any Dungeons and Dragons dice here, it will not display. So if we have the one with 6, that's the highest dice that we can show. We can set this back to 1. Now we're going to add a button to roll the dice. So we're going to use a button to change the image of the dice. A button uses a closure to run code when a person taps it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this image here within a VStack. So let's go ahead and highlight our image, right click, embed in VStack. So inside this VStack, below the image and its modifiers, we're going to start typing buttons. We're going to go outside this brace, do capital B, button, and we want to choose the one with the title, key, and then the action. So this third one on my screen. You can also see it's highlighted here on the tutorial as well. Go ahead and press return. And we're going to replace the first placeholder with the string of roll. Let's go ahead and do that. So the second parameter action, void, requires a closure that executes code when people tap the button. So you can press tab to select the placeholder. I'm just going to click it with my mouse, and we're going to press return. So Xcode removes the action parameter completely and replaces it with a closure contained in a pair of braces. There's a code placeholder inside the braces where you'll write code for the button. And that's actually something I learned from the tutorial. I would always type it out. So we're going to replace the last placeholder code to choose a random number of pips of the dice. So we can use int.random, and we're going to also have it given a range of 1 to 6. So we're within those braces, we're going to say number of pips, so that variable we created above, equals int.random. Then we're going to say in, and we're going to provide it with a range. So when we want to create a range, we'll do 1.6. So we're saying any number from 1 to 6. We use the triple dots to kind of say this is how far we're planning on going. But we're getting an error in our code. It says that we need to fix it because we can't assign to property self. It's currently immutable, which means it can't be changed. So the way that we do that is we're going to use state to update a view. So all apps have data or state that changes over time. When an app changes state, it may need to update its interface. However, SwiftUI doesn't monitor every property in an app by default. So in our app, we need to update this image when a person taps the roll button to tell SwiftUI to monitor number of pips and update the UI when it changes. So we're going to mark the property with the @state keyword. So we're going to go back up here to our variable number of pips, and we're going to use @state private, and then we have our variable number of pips. So now we can tap this roll button. It's a little bit hard to see currently, but we can see that it's updating and changing. That time I rolled a 5 twice, 3 5s in a row, 4 5s in a row. Oh my god, lucky or unlucky, who knows? But by using the state property, the view state is owned by the view. We always mark these state properties as private, so other views can't interfere with their value. Let's go ahead and add a border to set it apart from the image. So outside of our button here, we'll do dot button style. It is a little bit hard to see. We can do dot. We can also add some padding here. There we go. All right, to make the transition fade from the old dice image to the new one, we can actually use an animation to animate the change. So we're going to add with animation to animate any state changes that occur within its code. It uses a trailing closure similar to the way that the button works. So under our button here, we're going to say with animation. We're going to go ahead and add a brace. We'll also have to close it off too. And now we can see we kind of have this fading animation go in and out. As these kind of change, they kind of have that like fading transition with the animation, which is pretty cool. Now we're going to create a dynamic display of dice. So add functionality to choose the number of dice by creating another property. Marking the property with @state ensures the interface updates when the number of dice changes. All right, so we're actually going to go back to our content view here. I just have mine hidden so we get some real estate. So now that we're back in our content view, let's go ahead and get rid of this kind of hello world here. We can keep the VStack though. Let's go ahead and get rid of it. We're going to go ahead and replace it with a title. So we'll give some text here and we'll say dice roller do dot font. Let's do large title, and we can do dot lowercase small caps. Let's also bold it like it suggests. And if you want to, you can actually put these on separate lines if that makes it easier for you. Alrighty, now we're going to go ahead and add an HStack. Open it up with a brace, and we're going to create 3 different instances. Oh, I forgot the capital S on my HStack. I'm going to create 3 different instances of DiceView. Just go ahead and reference it 3 different times. Alright, so it looks a little bit cursed right now. Oh, it's because this isn't all in a VStack. Hold on, let me go ahead and fix this. Alright, let's go ahead and hop back. There we go. Okay, I was wondering why that wasn't working. My VStack was a little bit messed up on our dice view. Now that we're back in the content view, we can see our 3 dice with the roll below them. Sorry about that. Part of coding is fixing things. All right, so let's move on to step 3. So to be able to display any number of dice, use a for each view. And we'll repeat the dice view 3 times by using a range of 1 to 3. Type the code manually. For each has code completion options for many different uses. So within our HStack here, let's go ahead here and say for each. We're going to give it a range 1 dot 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 3. We'll do comma ID colon / dot description. We're going to add a opening brace here, underscore in dice view. So the for each view is dynamic. It computes its subviews based on its input, which may change with the state of the app. We can create the range using 1 dot 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 3, just as we did in that random of 1 to 6. The for each view creates 1 dice view for each value in the range. So currently that 1 dot 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 3 range is static. To make it adapt to any number of dice, we'll use the view state again. So we're going to add the state property for the number of dice. So let's go up here under our structure at state private var number of dice, which is an integer. This equals 1. So that default value is 1. Now we're going to use that number of dice in our range. So instead of in our HStack here for each 1 dot 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 3, we're going to change this 3 to be number of dice. And it wants us to experiment, change the default value. So if we change this to 4, when the user loads up the app, they'll have 4 dice there. It's a little bit cluttered right now currently though. Set it back to 1. Alrighty, so below the for each and the HStack, we're going to add 2 buttons to increase and decrease the number of dice. So let's go ahead and go outside of our HStack here. We're going to create a new HStack, and we're going to create a button. Remove dice. Add a brace here. We're going to say number of dice minus equals 1. And, we can save some time here. We'll copy this button, paste it. We'll change the remove to be add dice. And then instead of minus, we'll do plus equals 1. And then we can add some padding outside this HStack here. So it wants us to try out the buttons to make sure they work. So let's add that dice, remove the dice. Ooh, and if we go to negative, we actually crash. Ah! So good to know, don't do that. Which actually is, I went ahead, but that is step 7, reducing the number of dice to 1 and then tapping remove. It crashes, because the range 1 dot 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 0 is not valid. So we need to prevent people from tapping the remove dice button when there's only one on the dice view. We can use disable to prevent the crash and give people a visual cue that the button is unresponsive. So we can use the dot disabled modifier. So let's go to our remove dice here. I'm just going to create some space so it's a little bit easier to see. And we're going to do dot disabled, and then we're going to give it a condition. So we can say number of dice equals 1. So now we can see when that value is 1, this is grayed out. We can no longer press it. I'm clicking on it. We can add it, and once it's no longer disabled, we can remove it again. So we use the double equal sign operator to check whether those two numbers are exactly equal. The result of this comparison is a bool, which is a true or false value. When number of dice is equal to 1 or true, this modifier is going to disable that button. All right, so step 9, the images of the dice are currently fixed at 100 by 100. Is that what we made ours as well? It is indeed what we made it. So only 3 dice images can fit on the screen. I think when we had the 4th one, yeah, look how cursed this gets. Oh my God, what is happening? We can use the dot disabled modifier again if we want to keep it to only allow up to 3. So let's go back down to our add dice. We'll do the exact same thing. Dot disabled. And this time we're going to say number of dice equals 3. So that's going to limit the user to having only 3, because when there's 3 dice on the screen, they'll no longer be able to add it. Let's go ahead and test that out. We can see you can no longer click that. So let's go ahead and now also animate the change here. So when we have our remove dice, we'll go ahead and give it the width animation. Go ahead and wrap up those. And why not? Let's also do some with animation for the adding of the dice. So remember, just make sure that you're opening and closing those braces. Let's see what it looks like now. Oh, that's pretty cool. We have those animations as they get added and removed. All right, section 5, we're going to adapt the interface for more dice. So we're going to use flexible widths and height to allow the dice images to dynamically resize based on the number of dice on the screen. So we're going to increase the dice limit to 5 and then tap add dice until there are 5 dice. We're going to use an H stack, which always gives its subviews the required sizes, even if it needs to extend beyond the normal bounds of the screen. So for our disabled down here, we're going to change this to be 5. All right, and we're going to go ahead and pin this preview here. We're going to pop back over to our dice view. And we're going to use a flexible frame in order to allow the images to shrink. And so what we can do is in our frame here, see how we currently have it be width. We're going to set it actually to be max width. We'll just need to capitalize that W and that H, so max height. All right, now let's go ahead and press this. We should be able to have 5 dice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now that the dice images have flexible widths and heights, the H stack can shrink them to fit on the screen. But when there are 4 or 5 dice, they're stretched vertically, as we can see here, because there's nothing above or below the H stack to limit its height. To prevent this, we need to set the aspect ratio of the dice image to 1 and tap add dice until there are 5 dice again. So a 1-to-1 square has an aspect ratio that's equal to width and height. Squares are, perfect, right? The dot fit content mode means that if an image doesn't have the same aspect ratio as the available space, it will shrink into the smaller axes and leave empty spaces on the other. So under our frame here, let's do dot aspect ratio. I'm not going to use the autofill here because I'm going to do 1 because that's what we want our aspect ratio to be, right? Perfect squares are 1-to-1, right? We're going to do comma, content mode, and we're going to do dot fit. Let's go ahead and add those dice now. So you notice they shrink. However, they all fit on the screen. There's no more vertical stretching. All right, we're going to go ahead and now use images and button labels. We're going to customize the add and remove dice buttons to display images instead of text. So we're going to go hop back into our content view here. And we're going to add another argument to the add dice button to add an image. So down here where we have our add dice, we're going to add a comma here after our text. And we're going to say system image. And we're going to use the plus.circle.fit. If you want to use another one, you can just grab the name from our SF library. And now we can see that we have this kind of plus button here on our add dice button. So the view displays a button called its label. In many cases, we'll use a combination of images and text for buttons, make it as user-friendly as possible. You know, if you're having someone use the camera, it's a good idea to say camera, but also have that little picture of it as well. So for this button, an image is enough to tell people what it does, but a button should always have text. Should always have a text label, visible or not, so it's available for people who only use features like voiceover or screen readers. So we can hide the button text by using the .label style modifier. So let's go down here to our padding outside of this button. We're going to go after the padding, .label style. Select that one, .icon only. So even though this is actually affecting both of these buttons, because this remove dice doesn't have an image, it's not removing the text because it has no icon to display, which is really convenient. So let's go ahead and also increase the font size. So do .font and we'll set it to be title so it's huge. Good show. And let's also add an image to our remove dice button. So let's go up here, comma, system image, and we'll do minus.circle. And we can see we have this plus and minus button now. Pretty cool stuff. All right, now we're going to improve our app design. So we're going to style the buttons and dice and give our app a background color. Cool stuff there. So step one is we're going to add a custom background color set named app background. So let's go ahead and open up our assets catalog here. You can press the plus button or right click, new color set. It says choose your color names carefully. Some names like background and blue conflict with existing system defined colors. Okay, I'm gonna call this one app background. Go ahead and modify this to be for universal. And then for our color, let's just pick something out of the panel here. I'm gonna kind of do this lighter blue. I think that's a cute color. All right, let's go ahead and hop back over to our content view here. And we're gonna go down to this padding. So this is the one that's at the end of this V stack here. After the padding, we'll do .background. And then here, we're gonna say .app background, which is gonna reference that color. Cool, now we're gonna use the .tint modifier on the V stack to apply a global white tint to the app. So the tint modifier only affects views that rely on the accent color, typically controls such as buttons and toggles. Views use tints in different ways. For example, notice that the roll button gained a subtle white background. Let's check that out. So .tint .white. Alrighty, let's also change the color of the text view using the foreground style. So let's go to our text here, dice roller under our bold .foreground style, and we'll set this to be white as well. So to make the background expand and fill the entire screen, we can use a frame. We can also pass .infinity to the max width and max height parameters so that the frame will expand both directions as far as it can go. Let's scroll back down here. Before our background, we'll do .frame, and we'll set our max width to be .infinity, our max height to also be .infinity. So now it expands all the way. Also just gonna change my app background color. It's a little mixed. It's kind of clashing with the white. It's gonna make this a little bit darker. So classic dice are solid white with black pips. To make the dice face solid, we can open the DiceView file here, and we can use the filled variant of the dice symbol names. So where we have our image here, die face number of pips. After that number of pips interpolation, we're going to add dot fill. And now we need to set the foreground color on the dice to white. So we'll go down here, dot foreground style, dot. So notice that it changes the dice to white but leaves the pips transparent. So we're going to need to use, that brings us to step 8. To make the pips black, we need to use 2 foreground colors, 1 primary and 1 secondary. So we're going to use the foreground style modifier to set the primary color to black and then the secondary color to white. So we're going to see the effect of the SF symbol palette rendering mode. For the filled dice symbols, the pip assumes the primary color while the rest takes on the secondary color. So if you're using any other SF symbols, you might need to do it reverse. Like there's things like the rain cloud, the rain might, kind of like rain droplets might be a different, might be the primary, might be the secondary. Just play around with it. So we're going to go ahead in our foreground style here, and we're going to say dot black, comma, dot white. Right, if we were to inverse this, so if this first one were to be white and this other one were to be black, we can see that it's kind of that reverse roll there. So let's go ahead and set this back to what we had it to be. Alrighty, and that is our dice rolling app. Let's really quickly just check our understanding. So select the true statement about view state. SwiftUI automatically updates views of any value of its state properties when it changes. You mark state properties with the public keyword. We definitely don't do that. You change the value of a view state property from outside the view. I'm going to go ahead and say that's this first one here. A state property connects to our view in the SwiftUI state management system. All right, wants us to now select the correct button code. This first one here doesn't have braces. I don't think that's correct. This other one at the bottom has dot action. Nope, it should just be the center one. We provide it with the label, then we provide it with the code upon interaction. So a closure contains the code in the braces. How do we disable a button? We want to use the dot disabled keyword. Now we have 2 options. We have disabled and we have dot disabled true. We're going to go ahead and select this one. We need to pass true to the disable modifier to disable a button. And the way we did that was in our content view here. Within the parameters here, we basically gave it a condition to look for. When the number of die was equal to exactly 5, that condition was made true. Therefore, the button is disabled. Alrighty, we can press next. There's the article if you want to read a little bit more about it. I think there's usually some like challenges expanding the app. I just want to kind of talk about what we covered today. So we covered animation, disabling controls. We used the range operator, right? 1.5 and 6, etc. We also used aspect ratio to make sure that was still a square. We used dynamic sizing, resizable images. We used our assignment operators, buttons, styles. We used SF symbols, right? Even use randomization to generate those different roles. Let's add some different kind of die here. We also used for each, and we did some tint, and we also experimented with colors. So lots of great information found within this tutorial. The next one that we'll be diving on into will be the lists and text fields. So we're going to create a dynamic interface that stores a set of items in an array and displays them using lists. Use text fields and bindings to let people enter text. So it could be things like login screens, adding different items to a list, maybe a grocery list, right? So that will be our next tutorial, but I hope you enjoyed this one. Any materials we used will be found in the description below, as well as timestamps. So if you need to go back and kind of check your understanding, you can find it there. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you learned something new, drop it on in the comments. Otherwise, have a great day, dream big, code bigger, and we'll see you in the next one.